Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin. Is that dog for I'm Patrick Gare? Is that?
That's dog for I'm Patrick Guerra for all the initiated.
Yeah. If you didn't hear, if you do listen to us, not watch us on YouTube. You listen to the podcast. I always try to play a trailer. I looked everywhere for any trailer for Good Boy that didn't just involve scenes of Indy running around the house, and there wasn't one. So you didn't get an intro because literally the intro would have just been literally nothing. Like every
Yeah,
trailer is just
music.
him like walking around. There's not even music. I think it's just like him walking around. So I was like, well, there goes that idea. So yeah. So tonight, Patrick, we are talking about the very much talked about horror film dropping this weekend called Good Boy.
The Goodest Boy opened on October of 2025, starring the likes of Larry Fessenden as Grandpa, Ariel Friedman as Vera, Shane Jensen as Todd, and Damon starring the much ballyhooed good boy himself, Indy.
So I'm curious, this is a movie like we're gonna have to get to spoilers pretty quick because there's really
Oh
not
yeah.
a ton. But the idea, the premise of this film is pretty simple. It is a man moving into his grandfather's home, kind of isolated in the middle of nowhere. And as he's there, his beloved dog Indy starts noticing there's something off about this place. There's a presence. There's something inside this house, and it sounds, because it is ultimately, a very classic haunted house story. Except in this particular case, we are dealing with it from the point of view of the dog. So, like every conversation you're hearing from Todd, usually talking to his sister on the phone, you're just seeing it from Indy's point of view. When you're seeing the weird entities and the things going on around the house, you're literally watching it as Indy's watching it. So it is very much the point of view of the dog. So what you're hearing is absolutely what you're getting with this movie. Now, last year, Patrick, we talked about a little film called In a Violent Nature, a film that was told literally. This is more. I mean, this is the point of view of the dog, but you're really just with the dog. You're not necessarily seeing through
Yeah.
the dog's eyes. In a Violent Nature was a new take on the classic slasher where we literally see from the point of view of the killer, and that movie is like 90% literally just like the point of view of the killer as he like marches through the woods and hacks down teens, Jason Freddy style. My question is this, and this movie has been getting overwhelmingly positive reviews. A lot of our friends saw it at South by Southwest, which was months ago, and they're like, oh, wait till Good Boy comes out. You're going to love it. It's such a fun, creative movie, blah, blah, blah. I'm not disputing that by any stretch of the imagination yet. We'll talk more in depth about the review, but can I ask this question, Patrick? Where do we draw the line with these point of view films? Because I think like In a Violent Nature was creative, but my biggest criticism of that was just walking with a silent killer gets a little boring after a little while. Like I was like, that was an hour and a half movie. I said if that was like maybe like 70 minutes, 60 minutes, I think it would have worked better because they literally stay with him as he's just walking through the woods, and that gets a little boring. And I said, cut that down to 45 minutes to an hour. I think it would have been a better movie. In this particular instance, you're dealing with a dog, and while there is very minimal dialogue from the point of view of his owner Todd, it's just a lot of the dog walking around the house. I'm a dog owner. I have two dogs. I adore my dogs. I call my dogs my children. I love them. But I'm just being honest. Like, are we going to reach a breaking point of these, like, now we're watching the serial killer movie from the point of view of the vacuum? Like the vacuum that's in the house or the chair. I mean, do we draw a line somewhere?
Damon, I just came up with a point of view horror that I think I really want to do, and that's point of view of the zombie. Like, how great would that be if it starts in the coffin, with the like with the Return of the Living Dead gas seeping into the ground, water and all that shit. And then, the short answer, Damon, is there will be no bounds to which people try to reinvent horror. When I heard of Good Boy, I was very excited because you know me, Damon. I just go, I just bring it to me. Let me see what you got. Right. In a Violent Nature, I was like, cool. Let me see what you got. I liked it more than you did, and some people really enjoyed it, and I think it plays better in a movie theater. So when I heard the buzz out of South by Southwest about this movie told from the point of view of a dog, I could not wait. I go, how's this going to work out? We all know, Damon, you don't want to see the dog get hurt in a movie. It's really important, right? John Wick, a huge franchise, basically started with a boy and his dog. That's basically what John Wick was when it started. There was just they thought they were going to do this one-off action movie where he gets revenge for his dog, turned into a multi-million dollar franchise that has offshoots and TV shows and shit like holy shit. Like they forgot about the dog long ago, but when a dog is involved, everybody gets excited, Damon. Everybody wants a good boy in their life. So I understood the excitement right away. But you know me, Damon. You know I'm not sentimental. My cold, dead heart can give a shit. You have to present to me an interesting movie. I'm here to tell you without giving anything away. I think Good Boy at 72 minutes, which is an hour and 12, is actually very well made. I was like impressed from moment to moment at just how well crafted this movie is. As you said in the intro, for people who might not have heard, they spent 400 days shooting this because it was the writer Alex Cannon and director Ben Leonberg's dog, Indy. That was it. They did all the shooting and acting themselves. Nobody else was helping them during the shooting process. Then they added in actors doing the voiceovers later on and all that stuff. But just filming was them and the dog. And if you stick around after the credits, they'll actually show you some behind the scenes of how all that got done. That's charming, Damon. It's charming as hell. And a lot of people are just gonna okay. I was way into breakdancing back in the day, and they go, "Oh, here goes Patrick on another fucking tangent." We tend to do that around here, if you're new. We'd hang out, we'd be breakdancing, all that stuff, and then a little kid would come in and start breakdancing. Now, Damon, I know you were into hip hop too back in the 90s. The 90s hip hop went hard. If a kid was breakdancing in the circle, everybody gave him extra points. Everybody cheered for him louder. Everybody was super hyped and pumped about that little kid, no matter if his moves were basic or not. And that Damon is good boy in my opinion. People are extra cheering, extra hyping because they are in love with this little dog Indy. By the way, sweetest little dog. Oh my God. Damon, I don't even own a dog anymore. I don't care for a dog anymore. We lost our dog a couple years ago, and I was like, that's it. I think I'm done with dogs. But you cannot deny the charm and the love of a sweet faced dog, and Indy is very much that kind of dog. So I think a lot of the bluster for this movie comes from just the fact that we fucking love dogs. And by the way, good. We need some fucking good, warm, just just being overjoyed for an animal. Like I think that's great, and I want to keep spreading that love. And do I think people need to check out a movie like Good Boy? I do think they need to check it out. That does not mean I think this is a perfect movie, Damon. I have my qualms with it, and those are things we really have to wait for spoilers. This is a movie where like the premise is easy to understand, but almost all of the story is buried in spoilers. You really do have to get into it there. Um, as a dog father yourself, Damon, I have to imagine when you saw this little Indy, this little good boy himself, he had to melted your 6'3" tattooed tough guy combat sports heart.
It's funny because I didn't own a dog until 7, 8 years ago. I never had a dog, and when me and my girlfriend got our first dog, Hopper, who is the love of my life, I finally understood what it meant to like have that kind of just pure, unabashed love for another creature. And then we got our second dog, Brody, which both of my dogs are named famously after characters. Hopper, of course, being Hopper from Stranger Things, and Brody being Brody from well both Jaws and Mallrats. His name is Brody Bruce Martin, and Bruce is the shark, but Brody Bruce is actually the character from Mallrats. So
Yeah.
Hopper and Brody are my dogs, and I joke with my girlfriend all the time. Like we've had moments where like neighbors' dogs are kind of getting aggressive or whatever, and I'm just like, yeah, if a dog comes over and bites my dog, I'm going to stop that dog and then I'm going to go over and beat the living shit out of the owner. Like, I'm just like, I am incredibly protective of my dogs. So me a decade ago, before I had a dog, I think I honestly would have had a different opinion of this movie. Not that I didn't like dogs, I just never
Right.
understood that love, that like just pure love you have for an animal like that. Now that I do, I will go to the ends of the earth for my dog. So I knew it was going to affect me in a certain way, just because it's a dog in a horror film, and immediately your wires go up like, oh man, is something going to happen to the dog? And that's been the biggest question. Every single review, every single post I have seen about Good Boy has been the dog better be okay. Now, Patrick, you and I know that on our podcast, we go out of our way in the first half of our show to avoid all spoilers because we like to give everyone a fresh perspective going into the film. And we try to talk about, story points and acting and cinematography and other things about the movie without getting into the real nitty gritty of what happens because we want people to go in clean. You and I have learned to appreciate that. But even I, in my actually, and this is true, I never watched a trailer for Good Boy. I just knew the
Me neither.
premise. Didn't see
Premise
the
was
trailer,
all I
but I
knew.
knew the premise. But I did have that question, and I actually did watch movies that gave that answer because I was like, I don't think I could handle it if the dog gets mauled or something terrible happens to the dog. Like, I just know me. It would break my heart. Like, I just have a hard time thinking about it because I love my dogs. I'm going to say it now. If you don't want to know, pause, skip ahead like 20, 30 seconds. I'm just going to say it right now. The dog's okay. I think that's okay to know because I think that's okay to know going in because I honestly, if you would have said, you know what, the dog, it's bad for the dog. I don't know that I would have seen this, Patrick, because I'm like, that's kill. I know this sounds terrible. Kill humans all you want. You kill a dog, and I'm gonna be pretty upset. So I did want to know that going in, but at the same time, my general thought about it was, it's like, how is this gonna work? How are you gonna
Hmm.
tell me a compelling story now? In terms of creativity, I give Ben Leonberg, and it was his wife who was actually the co-producer on this film. He did have a co-writer, and then he had his wife was the co-producer, and it's their dog, him and his wife, their dog, Indy. Carrie, I think Carrie is her name. Carrie
Fisher.
Fisher, I
Yeah,
think, or
Carrie
Carrie
Fisher.
Fisher. And this was the idea, and I like when I heard that quote. He said that he watched Poltergeist and he noticed at the very beginning of the film the golden retrievers walk around the house, and the golden retriever realizes something's off because dogs are kind of known to have like this sixth sense about them. And I was like, what a creative way to get into a horror film. And I
Yeah.
give huge bonus points because it's hard to be creative in horror films these days, and I think it's well documented on this show, Patrick. I'm not a haunted house movie guy. 95% of them don't work for me because I live under the simple premise of you move into a haunted house, get the fuck out. There's your answer. You just solved the problem. You just solved the issue of your haunted house. Don't live there. While this movie doesn't reinvent the wheel when it comes to the haunted house genre, because I think it's safe to say that there's almost every haunted house movie, just get out. But when you put it in the point of view of the dog, it is creative. It is unique. And it
Yeah.
did draw me in. That being
And
said, I think my first criticism, maybe my biggest criticism, this movie, as you said, 72 minutes. That's a fast watch. And when I saw the runtime, I was like, okay, they're doing it right. Like, I have a hard time believing they're
yeah.
going to give me a 2 hour movie from the point of view of the dog. But I'll be honest, I saw this in the theater last night. It got done, and I was like, I think that could have been shorter.
Yeah.
I don't think I needed to be 72 minutes. Like, there were a couple moments, I'm sorry to say, where I got a little bored, and I was like, yeah, I think this could have been 45 minutes or 30 minutes. And that's not a knock on the filmmaking or the
It's
dog by
not.
any means. It's just when you're dealing with no dialogue, you're dealing with the story of where literally you're just watching a dog move around a house and seeing weird shit and investigating and trying to take care of his owner. It's creative. It's a creative way in. But just like anything else, just like I said with In a Violent Nature, I appreciate the creativity of looking at a slasher from the point of view of the slasher. But even I was like, it's an hour and a half. I'm like, this thing could have been 45 minutes. It did not need to be an hour and a half of him walking around. I'd have the same criticism about Good Boy.
Damon, I just looked it up as fast as I could because I wanted to get the number right. Any movie longer than 40 minutes is considered a feature-length film. Ever since COVID, and a good buddy of mine, Jed Shepard, wrote and produced the movie Host, which was a huge hit, and is it's not even found footage. It takes place in a Zoom call. That Zoom call ends in like 54 minutes or something like that, and they just made the movie exactly that long. They didn't try to find a way to make that movie longer. Ever since then, gloves are off. Even in the streaming world now, a lot of things come straight to streaming, which by the way, Good Boy will be coming to Shudder. I saw that Shudder was sponsoring it. Um, this movie didn't need to be any longer than it needed to be. Now, I get it if you're like, "Oh man, but we got this moment, and we got that moment, and we got that moment." Much like found footage, when you tie yourself to a very specific template, and you have to, commit to it as this movie does. This movie does not cut away from the dog's perspective. It is the dog's perspective the whole movie. When you do that, you kind of hamstring yourself and you got to make choices. I personally would have chosen to make this movie even shorter than it is. If 40 minutes is the cap, I would have made this 41, 42 minutes. And I think this would have been a knockout movie at 42 minutes. I don't think it needed to be 72 minutes. It's wild that I'm even saying that. It's what 72 is breezy. I mean, there's almost no movie. Almost all movies in theaters are 90 minutes long. So for me to say, I think a 72-minute movie needed like 30 less minutes. It's crazy because you're like, it's already really fucking short. It's like, yeah, it could have been shorter. And we got to get more and more comfortable with that as filmmakers, just going like, yeah, just give them less. You think you need to stuff this thing with more. You probably don't. And especially with a premise this simple and lean and streamlined, like just take us through the measures. Like run us through this. I've said this a million times. Alien, one of the simplest premises you can get. That movie does not overcomplicate itself. It does not overstay its welcome. It gets to the fucking point, and then it's done. There's no extraneous scenes that I go, you should cut this from Alien. I think it was too long. That's not a thing with Alien. Good Boy is really well made. Good Boy, believe it or not, really well acted. Yes, a dog is the lead of this movie, and it's good. There's nothing wrong with this movie other than its length. That's it. I can't say much more, Damon, until we jump into spoilers, because then I can talk about why I feel that way. But that is ultimately what I feel. This is a good movie that overstays its welcome.
And add to that, right before we get to spoilers, I got to say this because I'm agreeing with you. This was a fun, creative movie. I enjoyed it. And I'll say this up front, and this is me as a dog owner saying this. I'm not saying it's going to play this way for everybody else. It played this way for me. This might end up being the scariest film of the year for me because every time there's a moment where you think maybe the dog's going to be in peril, my butthole clenched up to like the size of a dime. Like I was terrified because
Quite the visual.
I did not want anything happen to this adorable dog. So we talk about dread, we talk about tension. This movie has that in spades. If you're even a casual dog lover, you're going to be watching this movie thinking, "Oh shit, what's going to happen?" And it's not about jump scares or anything like that. It's just knowing the dog potentially could be in peril. That hit me, man.
Yeah.
I was like, my stomach was clenched during this movie, and seriously, because I'm like, please, even though, and that's what I said, like the simplest of spoilers about whether or not the dog makes it. I'm telling you, doesn't ruin the atmosphere of this movie because there's several moments where I'm just like, is something going on with the dog? Is something happening to the dog? Is the dog going to be okay? And when I thought for a minute maybe it wasn't, I was like, all right, this is too much. I can't handle this. That's effective storytelling. That's an effective movie. So I appreciated that. I appreciated that part of the story, and I appreciated the harrowing nature of like a dog being in these situations. It was well done. I was legitimately enthralled by that. It was legitimately terrifying to me at certain points. But also to that point, like as I said earlier, like when I said like it gets a little repetitive, it gets a little boring. That just goes into you could only go so far with your storytelling
Yeah.
because I think, and this is, let me be clear about this. This is not me telling Ben Lindbergh what he should have done. I'm just giving an example. This movie ultimately takes place between a boy and his dog. This is one guy and his dog in a house, isolated. Now, shooting over 400 days in their own house, by the way. This was actually the director's house they shot at. So the dog was familiar with the surroundings, and like when the dog's running around like he owns the place, because he does. It's his actual home. I get all that. And what they're dealing with on what I have to imagine is a shoestring budget, and they're just shooting, like I said, 400 days over 3 years. I'm not going to criticize them. But I think if you wanted to add a couple other layers to this, you would have had like a family. So there could have been more conversation. There could have been more human interaction with the dog and with each other. But when you're just dealing with one person, and literally the only other real character in this movie is, well, there's a couple other characters, but in terms of like interactions, you're dealing with the owner and his sister on the phone a lot. They have like a close relationship. But that's really it. There's no girlfriend hanging out. There's no kids. There's no uncle living there. There's no brother living there. It's just this dude and his dog. And while you can make an effective movie that's just silent, we talked about this, was it last year or 2 years ago with Azrael, the one with Samara Weaving, had literally no talking whatsoever. But there was just so much happening at such a pace that it didn't really affect you because there was no dialogue. This movie, I feel like, when we talk about the length and how it kind of keeps you on the hook, it works and they do it well. But I think that also kind of dragged it down for me a little bit, because it's just like you're literally just watching the dog walk around the house a lot. Not saying it doesn't work, it does. But I think, like, in my head, I'm like, I think we could have done with a little bit more conversation, a little bit more interaction. And that's where I get back to my point of this could have been a 40-minute movie, because ultimately the dog walking around, the dog, discovering things around the house, it's repetitive. It happens over and over and over again. And I feel like much like the reviewers or the people watching this movie are saying, is the dog okay? They want to know that going in, is the dog okay? I feel like there's another side of this where it's almost like you don't want to judge it too harshly because you love the dog, right?
Sure.
Like, this dog's adorable. I like the idea. I do. I like this premise. I love Indy. Oh my God, the dog! I would pet him and rub his belly for an hour if that owner would let me do it. That dog's
very cute dog.
But it's also, you're also like, you don't want to be critical. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to be the asshole. We're going to be critical. I just feel like there's layers to this film that I think you could have explored potentially, that maybe would have made it play out a little differently for me. And so what I'm getting at, this long giant preamble I've given you, this to me feels like a one-time viewing. Now I know a lot of our horror talk friends are like, I've already seen it 2-3 times. That's awesome. For me, I saw it once. It was cool. It was a fun experience, and I'm glad I saw it in the theater. But I can't sit here and lie to you and say I'm going to run out to see it 10 more times when it comes out on Shudder. Like, I'm telling you, it's an enjoyable experience, and it's an original experience. But it's also not the kind of movie that I'm going to be like, oh man, it's Friday night, I got nothing to do, let me put on Good Boy. Probably not. I'm being honest about that.
It's no Freddy versus Jason.
That was on the other night. I was watching it.
I'm telling you, that's a rewatcher all the time.
But does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does, Damon. And shall we get into spoilers? Because I'd love to expand on the why of it all. By the way, it's in theaters. It got, because of the buzz online, it actually expanded from a limited release to a wide release. And I'm super happy for the filmmakers that got to happen. I'm fully in support of this movie. I want you to go out there and decide for yourself. And then you jump into our comments on Instagram and yell at us and tell us about how we're meanies and how we hate dogs and all that shit. Like, go ahead and do all that. But support great independent films. It's well made. It's a good idea. Check out Good Boy in theaters now.
100%. All right. With that being said, we're not going to get into spoilers. Now, remember, if you want early access to this episode days before anyone else, Patreon.com/RwandaLivingDead. Check out our Patreon. You get to listen to this episode days ahead of everyone else. Very cheap. Now we're not asking for a lot of money, but it does support us, supports the show. You're also going to get. We're going to be doing a regular film review in the very near future. I think that voting is almost wrapped up at this
I
point.
think it's closed as of midnight tonight, so it will be closed in just a few hours, Damon.
So we will have a new movie review on there exclusive for Patreon that's not horror. So you
Hmm.
can hear that as well. We also did reviews of the entire Alien Earth series if you watched that. So check out patreon.com/Wanted Living Dead. Now, Patrick, let's get into spoilers, and I'll just give you the premise of the film because it's really not a. I mean, I gave it to you at the top of the episode. It's really the same. A guy dealing with health issues in New York City decides to move into his father's or his grandfather's kind of old, isolated cabin in the middle of nowhere. And he's struggling with some sort of lung disease. He has seems like he has lung cancer. They never say it out loud what he actually has, but he's dealing with a lung disease. And he moves there with his beloved dog, Indy. And as soon as they get there, Indy starts seeing weird, shadowy figures around the corner, weird, creepy shit happening in the basement, and it's also affecting his owner. And they come to find out that his grandfather, who lived there, played by Larry Fessenden, kind of a horror legend there, uh, he dealt with something similar with his dog. He had a dog there as well. And they said, and basically at the beginning of the story, his sister on the phone tells him everyone who's ever lived there has moved within like 2 weeks, except for their grandfather, because there's some weird shit that goes on there. So they even knew that going into it. They kind of tell you that going into it. And weird shit starts to happen. It starts to affect Indy. It starts to affect the owner. And that's really the premise. I don't really know that I'm missing a point here. Am I? Like, as far as what it is?
No, I really loved actually the opening of the movie was nice and spooky. It starts with on little Indy and he's sitting there, in this New York City apartment and his owner is sitting in a weird position, almost like hunched over and something is very off and strange. But again, we're with the perspective of the dog. And what I loved is like right away they turned to see what it is that Indy's looking at and he's looking at a dark corner of the wall and that dark corner starts to grow a little bit. And so there's just this like looming dread right away. And I was like, oh, cool, that's interesting. And then what I really love is, jump to him going to grandpa's house. He, what I really appreciated early on was that they did this thing where, you know, Indy can kind of hear conversations even if they're a little bit farther away. And I was like, oh, that does make sense. It makes sense that Indy's sitting in the car and his owner is out in the rain over by the gate trying to get the gate open, but he can hear what they're saying because of course he can. He's a dog. And I was like, that's actually a really cool conceit. That's a really cool idea. It's like, yeah, his senses are better than ours. So he's going to see things in a way that you can't see them. Then they get into like smell, which I thought was really interesting too. Excuse me, Indy smells something and it like triggers like thoughts in his head. And then they cut to those thoughts. And I was like, that's fucking wild. Like, I wouldn't have ever thought of that. Like, these are the things in this movie that got me really excited right away. I was like, you really are bringing us into what the dog experiences because he will never really know what's going on with his owner. I took it as impending death is what I thought he was sensing um based on what was going on. But then when the idea of the dog who used to live there, grandpa's dog, comes into play, I was like, "Oh wow, so there's like some other thing here." It's almost like if you're in like let's say a movie like Black Phone. Spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen Black Phone, but the kid in Black Phone starts communicating with dead kids and he's able to talk with kids from beyond. In this movie, Indy talks from with a dog from beyond, and I was like, "That's kind of fucking cool." And I believe the dog's name in the movie is Bandit, played by the dog Max. By the way, credit to Max for coming in and playing a good dog. And basically, like, there's like a dog ghost that kind of helps him with what's going on in the house, and it all of this leads to a lot of like interesting mystery for you. And that's kind of what keeps you on the hook. You're like, okay, well, what's going on here? Because if he can see what's going on with Bandit, then what really happened here? And I think that's the question. And then you see these videos that are playing, and it's Larry Fessenden as the grandpa, and he's talking about this and talking about that, and Indy's just sitting around this TV, and I'm like, why are these videos even playing? They're just to help kind of with exposition and shit like that. And I'm going, okay, it's kind of interesting, cool. about 30, 40 minutes in, I'm like, okay, but so what's going to happen? This is where the movie gets hamstrung, Damon, because it is just from the dog's perspective. So you have to stay there. You do. I don't I think like cutting away to someone else's perspective would have been a mistake in this movie. So they have to stick with the dog's perspective. And after a while, you get to the point where you're going, the dog can only sense and see so much. So how is this going to play out? And that's when it started to get repetitive, Damon. What say you? Because to me to me that was the problem. I was like, you've got me on the hook for this interesting little mystery, but you kind of have to just keep repeating the mystery until something happens to his owner.
I think the best analogy I can give is probably one of the found footage movies that I adore. Most people do adore, but I know you found kind of repetitive and kind of because of a lot of dumb choices being made. But a movie like Paranormal Activity, where the incidents continue to ratchet up, but it takes a while to get there, and it just feels like you're kind of going to like, okay, it's night two, it's night four, it's night six, and it's kind of the same thing happening, escalating, and then people are making really remarkably dumb decisions, but it does feel repetitive because you're just in an apartment with this one couple, and it just things keep happening, and I enjoyed it. But I'll say this: I think the original Paranormal Activity is great. But I'll be honest, I think I've seen it like 3 times. I don't know that it's one that I'm going to revisit every year. Whereas like Blair Witch, I could watch every single year and probably never get
Yeah.
tired of that because that's just a different experience. But what I'm getting at is like Indy noticing something weird and creepy going on in the house, and he goes exploring, and he's in one room, and he's in another room, and he's down the basement, he's downstairs, he's in this door, he's in that door. All of it's shot well. All of it is like, and as I said, I'm being honest when I say it's harrowing because around every corner, I'm like, please, for the love of God, don't let anything happen to this adorable dog. But it does get repetitive because then it's just like, oh, he's in this room. Oh, he's in that room. Oh, there's a shadow. There's another shadow. There's another weird thing. It just feels like I've seen this. And that's where I go back to my point about like, I think it would have been a little more like narratively better had they had other people around to interact or like we know that the owner is Todd. I think the character's name is Todd, talking to his sister Vera on the phone. It happens a couple 3 times in the entire movie, but it's almost like Vera could have been there, Vera could have been on the phone more, just to kind of
Yeah.
understand, because you don't really totally understand what's going on with the owner. He's sick, you know that. And there's a point where he actually goes in to see a doctor, and they're like, yeah, you're terminal, like you're not a candidate for a clinical trial. You're basically fucked, is more or less what the doctor tells him. And he's like, I'm dying. You should help me. This is a great way to see if it actually works, because if it helps me, it's going to help other people. And so you understand what's going on with this guy. He is slowly dying, or very quickly dying, actually, as it turns out. But a lot of the dog scenes are repetitive because it's just like, oh, he's here, he's there. And so you're just like, okay. Now, I will say the last like 20 minutes, it does get ramped up a little bit because at one point, the owner basically shoves his dog off him because he's like, so he's getting kind of like, he's getting sicker, but he's also like, there's something going on in the house, whether it's like attaching itself to him or it's affecting him, and he basically like pushes his dog off him. It's almost like he gets mean to Indy. And at that point, I was like, "Fuck this guy, let him die." Uh, but but then at one point, he ends up putting Shaning Indy outside in like a dog house, and some weird ooky shit starts happening out there. And the dog actually does get attacked, and the dog has to like fend for itself. And I mean, that was like my moment where I was like, "Oh my god, you're gonna hurt the dog, and I'm gonna lose my mind." And that does work. It's when they finally put the dog in a different situation and it ratchets up the tension that the film starts to get good again. But I was getting a little bored of the repetitive, he's in this room, he's in this room, there's something in that corner, there's something in that corner, there's a video playing, there's something under the bed. It just felt like the same thing over and over. And the last 20 minutes, last 15 minutes, when you put Indy outside, then you put him down in the basement. That's when it starts to kind of ratchet up and the tension builds again because it does kind of like it starts good, the middle gets a little bloated, and then the end is really solid.
That's a fair assessment. I think what the uh, more so, Damon, I have a question here because I'm sort of not confused, But we start with the idea that Todd is sick, and we get that. But there were again, the first thing is like you see that shadow looming, and then when you get to the house, the grandpa videos indicate that grandpa's like off his rocker, but he's also seems to be suffering from almost the exact same thing that's killing Todd. And you're like, okay, is this hereditary? You don't know, and you can't know because you're only seeing the world from Indy's eyes. And then there's this mud monster, and the mud monster kind of keeps, I guess, getting closer and closer and closer. And that to me was like looming death, creeping death, if you will. And I was like, okay, great. So this mud monster, I got it. Was the mud monster causing the illness, or was it just what death looks like? I couldn't I think this movie, because it had to stick from the perspective of Indy, can never truly answer it. I'm just curious what you thought about that, because it's not the most satisfying answer in the end.
It's funny you say that because when I got home, I read a spoiler review, like a spoiler of the movie, because I didn't know, and I was like,
Hmm.
did I not? And the spoiler review or the spoiler synopsis said like there's an entity in the house, and it basically claims Todd, and Todd knows he's dying, and that's where you see like Todd. There's a moment where Todd is kind of seeing outside of himself, like he's there, but then he looks down,
Yeah,
his body's there, and that's when you realize Todd is already dead. And he's basically like telling Indy, like, you have to go on, like, leave me alone. And yet Indy's
right.
still trying to save his owner because he's a loyal good boy. But I actually took it more of your perspective that Todd was dying and this looming mud tarman creature was just death creeping closer and closer to a dying man. And the dog, sensing the presence of death, is trying desperately to save his owner because it's his owner. He
Yeah.
loves him. Dogs love us unconditionally. And this dog, this owner, is this dog's entire world. Like, that's why dogs are so special. Like, that's why it always breaks my heart when you see videos of people being mean to dogs, because dogs are inherently, they love you. Like, you are their entire universe. And so I thought my perspective was, this is death coming for Todd, and Indy is desperately trying to save him from death. So while it seems like there's this presence, there's this evil in the house, I didn't really take it as that. The way I saw it was Todd is sick and getting sicker, and the sicker he gets, the closer this mudman, tar monster, whatever you want to call it, is just literally looming to take him to the grave because he's already dying. So was there a presence? I don't know. It's just I think to me it spoke to the age old question of like, or the age old curiosity of when like dogs are like just staring in a corner, or
Yeah.
dogs bark and there's nothing there. You're like, what are you seeing, boy? And everyone's like, oh, they got a sixth sense. And no, there's something there. Like, they're just barking in a corner. Like, doesn't have to be a rhyme or a reason for a dog to bark in a corner, but everyone's like, oh, my dog's seeing, like, he's got a sixth sense. He's got a third eye. Okay. So I think that in a way, people that saw this movie are like, there's an entity haunting Todd. Maybe it is, and maybe that's exactly what the director wanted. But in my opinion, it was almost like Todd is dying, and this is death creeping for Todd. And when the end of the movie, we might as well talk about it. As I said, like, there's a moment where the tar thing kind of gets Todd, and he's down, dragged into the basement, which is where he also found the other dog, where he found Bandit's corpse, basically his bones. And it seems like Grandpa was sick and dying, and he ended up down in the basement, and that's where he kind of expired. And Todd is kind of going through the same thing. And there, like I said, there's that moment where Todd sees outside himself. He sees his body laying on the bed, and that's when you're like, oh, Todd's already dead. This is just his spirit. And the spirit goes down to the basement, and Indy is desperately trying to bring him back. It's almost like
Yeah.
he's in purgatory, and the dog just wants to bring back his owner. And at one point, Todd's like, "No, you have to go." And that's
Yeah.
the sad part, is like him letting go of Todd. And the end of the movie is literally Vera showing up, discovering her brother's dead body, and then finding Indy down in the basement and saying, "Come on!" And he eventually like leaves Todd and goes up to Vera, and that's the end of the movie. So was there a presence there? I don't know. The way I took it was this was just death creeping that much closer and closer to Todd.
I think that's how I'm going to interpret it too. I don't think it's an entity. I think he in the very first shot of the movie, Indy is seeing death looming for Todd. He sees it coming for Todd. And all the videotapes and all the kind of side story that we're getting with Grandpa there was just like, yeah, Grandpa was dying. They just happen to be dying of the same thing. Perhaps it's, a type of cancer that can be passed down, and it skipped a generation and went from Grandpa to Todd. That's kind of how I saw it. It's like they got the same kind of cancer and Todd is now stricken with it. He's just dying way younger from it than Grandpa was. And poor little bandit, like he had the same problem that Indy had, but he had no one to come and save him. No one was coming to save Grandpa. No one was coming to look for Grandpa. So he waited there in that basement thinking he could get Grandpa back because dogs can sense the spirit from the other side, which is poetic and sweet, and I really like that idea. Bandit wasn't saved, but Indy was. I think maybe where I would have steered the movie is more literally more towards the Indy bandit story and just been like, can we save Indy from being trapped waiting for the soul of his owner? Kind of like that meme in Futurama, where the dog waited forever for him and he never came. That kind of idea, like, can we save Indy from that fate? Because that was the fate that Bandit had. He was stuck in that basement until Grandpa, until somebody finally came for Grandpa, whatever weeks, months later, and it was too late. Bandit was done. Luckily, Vera was hounding Todd this whole time and trying to stay close to Todd and trying to make sure he was okay. So when he didn't answer his phone, she came right to Grandpa's house and probably found him, I would say, the next day, probably, and then found Indy the next day waiting down there in that basement. And then that choice of like, Indy didn't want to leave and Todd was like, "Go, boy, go, just go." I love that. Like I thought that was great. And again, this would have been a great movie had this been 40 minutes and we got through that. I think it would have been a solid movie, but it wasn't. It got repetitive. It got belabored over time, and at the end of the day, that's as good as it was, and as good a boy as Indy was. I think it was just too long, which is crazy to say for 72 minutes, Damon, but I think it was too long.
And last thing I'll say about the ending, the other reason why I believe that we're right in our assessment, and I'm not, this isn't a contest because maybe the director would come on and tell us, like, no, no, you're totally wrong. But the reason I did that is because, as you said, the literal opening of the movie is Todd sitting on a couch and he starts bleeding because he's passed out, and Vera finds him passed out, and the next scene you see he's in the hospital recovering, and you realize he's sick. If it was just about an entity haunting the house and it was just about that, then he could have just made Todd broke. Like Todd, like, I need to find a house to live. I got to live in Grandpa's house because I got nowhere to
Right.
go.
Yeah.
And then this entity starts haunting him and comes for him, and that's the story. You're not in like a physical you're in a physical peril because of a ghost or an entity, but you're not in like a physical danger from your own body. The fact that the movie literally opens with Todd being sick and very sick, and then ending up in the hospital, and then leaving and deciding to go live in Grandpa's house, that to me tells me this was all about death lurking and hunting and stalking Todd, and Indy doing everything in its adorable self to try to stop death from getting its owner. So
Yeah.
that's why I took it that way, because literally the story starts with Todd being sick. If you don't want that
Yeah.
confusion, or you don't want that to be the point of the story, then you make Todd broke, or you make Todd, some other version of why he has to go live in this house, not because he's like on death's doorstep and he just wants to find a place comfortably to more or less expire, for lack of a better word. So that's to me why I think we're on the money as far as like, this isn't really an entity. It's death was always coming for Todd, and Indy was desperate to save his owner because he's the goodest boy. That
Yeah.
to me was the story, not there was some evil presence in the house hunting Todd. I think it was just death and getting closer and closer because Todd was getting sicker and sicker.
Okay. The only pushback I have against that was death must have, we've talked about this with Final Destination. Death must have actually been an entity in that case. Would you
Yeah.
agree?
Oh
Because
yeah, yeah.
there are moments where it attacks Indy because it doesn't want Indy to save its owner, because he every time like Todd's getting extra sick, like Indy tries to get near him and help him, and they talk about like dogs can sense people's illnesses and stuff like that. So that I took that as death pushing against Indy and going, "Hey, leave him alone, he's mine." even to the point where death closes the door on Indy, quite literally. So it almost behaves like a ghost. I mean, is that how you see it?
Yeah, yeah. No, like I said, it's an entity, but it's not like a haunted entity. It's not like we're
It's
in
not. Yeah.
Poltergeist where there's like a
Yes.
there's like a spirit haunting the house. This is just the manifestation of death coming
Yeah.
for him, and the same way it came for Grandpa. And they say it's some sort of lung disease. It's something to do with that, we know, because he coughs up blood a couple times. So it may not be cancer. It may just be some sort of hereditary lung disease, which I'm not a doctor, so I haven't really looked this up. But it could just be that, like his grandpa had something similar, and he got stricken with the same kind of thing. And you know, yes, it's similar circumstances. His grandpa living out in the middle of nowhere with a dog. Now Todd's living out in the middle of nowhere with a dog. But that also speaks to like the kind of peace that Todd was trying to find. Like he knew how his grandpa expired, maybe in his ways. Like, I want to go out there and have some peace before I go. Because, like, as we said at one point during the movie, he goes to see a doctor, and the doctor tells him, like, there's nothing we can do for you, man. Like,
Yeah. You're
more or
too far
less, he's
gone.
like, you're screwed. And so we know that Todd is dying, and Todd has to know he's dying. So yeah, I think death is a thing, like it's an entity, but not in this traditional sense of a ghost haunting the house, or
Right.
there's a spirit, a malevolent spirit in the house. No, it's just literally Todd is dying, and this is death coming for him.
I agree.
Patrick, you want to get in some categories, and let's talk more about this movie, and let's kick things off as we do each and every week here, and let's just go ahead and let's just give our best performance to who we know we're going to give our best performance to. Come on now.
It could be the only one, Damon. The best performance goes to Indy, and I'm not just saying that because I love the dog. He is 99% of this movie. You barely see Todd's face. Todd's face is like purposefully obscured. Vera's on the phone 99% of the movie. Even like the hunter that lives in the area, like he's covered in a ghillie suit most of the time. You never see him. You only see this movie through the face of Good Boy and a little bit of Bandit. But Good Boy, Good Boy, but Indy has the sweetest face. He really does. He has the sweetest face. And if you stick around after the credits, the director actually takes you through a little bit of the making of the movie, which I appreciated. And they just talked about, our dog Indy, he just has this serious look on his face all the time. So we thought he'd be great for this. He's not a trained actor dog. They would do about 2 or 3 hours a day maximum of shooting with him. That's why it took 400 days to shoot this thing. And just caught the right moments for him. So this is it's a great job by Ben Leonberg for picking all the right moments, but also Indy gives great face. He just does. It really works. It really works for the camera, and you really root for this dog. It's a very sweet dog. He's got a sweet face. He's got great reactions. Yeah, it's Indy.
You are a professional filmmaker by trade, Patrick, and I know that you understand and appreciate the craft of filmmaking. And one thing we do on our show, different maybe than other shows, and I'm not critiquing other shows, but we certainly try to dig deep into the nuance of like the difficulty of filmmaking, which is why even when we don't like a film, let's say Strangers Chapter 2, we still try to appreciate how hard it is to just get a movie made. Now, in that case, we were like, why the fuck did you make this movie? But neither here nor there. But I'm being honest when I say this, people are like, that's not a reason to like this movie. But in a way, it was. When I watched that post credit scene of Ben Leonberg talking about Indy and showing the behind the scenes, like, he literally showed, like, it's a daytime scene of the dog laying on the bed, but they darkened it in post and made it look like it's nighttime and it's haunted. But the scene was actually shot totally during the day and the dog's just, like, laying on the bed. I watched that and he talked about how much they had to go through because Indy's not a trained dog. Like they're literally just like that's why the entire movie is him and his wife because it's their dog. Like like they're getting their dog to go up on the bed, they're getting their dog to run around the corner, they're getting their dog to go up on a chair, things like that. I was like, man, that's like what I just like. What a painstaking labor of love to do this, and that dog was so sweet and so cute and so adorable doing all this, and the craft of the filmmaking was like, man, I can kind of appreciate this even more because like talk about 400 days over 3 years, like that's dedication. To your point about best performance, though, that speaks to why Indy is so incredible because there are trained dogs, there are
Yeah.
film dogs, there are dogs who are like One of my favorite is Brandy in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That's right.
How could you not love Brandy in that movie? But the way that Brad Pitt, snaps or does the I can't do the click thing
Yeah.
with his mouth, but like the click with his mouth, like he does, and the dog jumps, the dog eats, the dog attacks, and like that.
Yeah.
But that is also a very well trained dog. That is a professional dog. I remember watching stories about that, like how Brandy was like a real trained dog. You can have that. Dogs are very incredibly talented. I mean, just watch, a dog show. You see dogs like command at everything. Indy is not that. And that's not to give an excuse and say, like, this is a better movie because the dog wasn't trained that well. I'm just saying, like, that's an amazing feat to get what the emotive performance you get out of a dog that isn't trained to do this. I love it. And I think it was beautiful, and it was such a sweet puppy, and like how could you not like there's literally they show you the scenes of like where he gets the dog and you see Indy as a puppy, and then you see Indy growing up, and I'm just like I'm in love with this dog. I'm like, do you
Yeah.
want to give me the dog? Like, do you need me to take Indy? Because I will. But it's genuinely a good performance because just like you're talking about with a lot of the found footage movies, when like let's just say Blair Witch for instance, three actors, yes, actors, but they were very inexperienced actors. The one guy wasn't even an actor, Michael Williams. I don't think he was even an actor at all. He was just kind of there. Like, you got those performances genuinely because, like, it was a harrowing shoot and a harrowing production, and they had to bring everything into themselves to that. And I think the one genuine thing about a lot of found footage when you use like untrained actors, you can get some genuinely emotional performances. Now sometimes it goes wrong, or oftentimes it goes wrong, but occasionally you will get those really genuine performances. And I think that's kind of what you get from Indy because he's not a trained dog. Like watching them, like literally spend. They said like during that post credit scene, he's like, we would spend an entire day just trying to get him to jump off the bed. And I'm like, that's awesome. That takes dedication and good on you, Indy. So it is. It's Indy's movie. It is literally Indy's movie.
It is literally Indy's movie.
Patrick, next category. Let's talk about our MVP. Once again, we're going to be talking about the same person here because how could you not? So, who is the MVP of Good Boy?
The MVP is co-writer and director Ben Leonberg, and originally I was gonna actually give my MVP to the cinematographer because as I was watching the movie, I go, "Where the camera is this whole movie is so immersive. It really does respect the point of view of the dog. You're always feeling that." So I was gonna give it to the cinematographer. Well, it turns out Ben Leonberg is the cinematographer of the movie, and as you said so eloquently, um, the patience and the craftsmanship of the filmmaking it took to shape a story around Indy, who is not a trained dog, to really understand and see the emotions and all that stuff. It takes tremendous amounts of work. It takes tremendous amounts of patience, and you have to get into the editing booth and make it make sense in the editing booth. Ben Leonberg did the damn thing. This is not an easy movie to make. It's a very difficult movie to make. They say don't work with kids or animals, and he decided, oh, how about I do a movie with just an animal? Well, he fucking found out, didn't he? He found out that 3 years later, his little experiment of I'm just gonna shoot a little horror movie with my dog and see how it goes. 3 years later, it's coming out, but to that point, it's come out to rave reviews and it's come out to a wide release, like a huge release. So good on you, Ben Leonberg, because this I know how hard this was to shoot, and the damn thing got done.
I'm going to echo everything you said. I'm not going to repeat it, but I think this plays into what we bring to this show. You are a filmmaker. I'm a writer. Story wise, I think the inspiration of watching an opening scene of Poltergeist and seeing the golden retriever realize that something is off and that inspiring the idea,
Yeah,
what would it look like to do a horror film? That's fucking genius.
yeah.
Like
Oh my God, I'm
I've seen
jealous of it's
I've
such a
seen
it's such a great idea.
Poltergeist is one of my favorite. That movie scared the living dog shit out of me as a kid. Like that terrified me as a child. That is probably the scariest film I ever saw as a child. Never once would it occur to me to tell a story from the dog's point of view. Not gonna lie. So even though I did say like the story got a little repetitive and I feel like it should have could have been a shorter film, the fact that Ben Leonberg saw that movie a million times and somehow in 2012 it clicked in his head like, hey, It's kind of curious. The dog realized something was off about this house long before the family did. Wonder what that would look like in a full movie. That's genius because I didn't. I've seen that movie a million times. I never would have thought of that. So regardless of anything else about this movie, the fact that he took that little nugget, that little kernel from an all-time classic film, and then somehow transformed that into a movie, genius, genius.
Totally genius. I love that.
Next category, Patrick, best scare. Okay, I keep repeating ourselves. We're going to have the same moment here, but it is. I can't lie, and I'm not going to make up something about my favorite scare. What is the best scare in Good Boy?
The best scare has to do with dog nightmares. And I want to just get into this really quickly. I really did love how dog nightmares are portrayed because what they did, they kind of did the Nightmare on Elm Street thing, Damon, where we didn't realize we were in Indy's dream. So you think he's like walking through the house and seeing something and there's weird noises and like things don't make sense. It's almost supernatural. And then when the scare happens, like Indy wakes up and you realize Indy's just he was just sleeping by his owner and he was having a bad dream. And we all know that if you've had a dog, you'll watch them while they're sleeping and sometimes they're having a bad dream or not even a bad dream. They're just dreaming that they're running or barking or some weird shit. They're actually dreaming about stuff. They're thinking about stuff too. And they do that in this movie, and that's to me where the best scares came from. And there was one great scare where Indy is going down into that basement, which we know that some bad shit happened down there, and he sees Todd laying at the bottom of the stairs, and he sees him, and you're like, wow, that's weird, super freaky. And then out of nowhere, Todd rushes up the stairs, is like crawling up the stairs and trying to attack Indy, and then Indy wakes up. And I was like, dude, that was a freaky ass fucking scene. And then you realize it was just a dream. I loved it.
That one, that's the one that's also my favorite scare because it literally sent chills down my spine when it happened. Like it one of the rare moments where like I got scared in the movie, like, oh shit, it jolted me. And I'll just throw this out there as like another just like addition to that. I'm being serious when I say this. If you love dogs, and most people should, I would hope, there's a moment where Indy is in his little doghouse and he's on a chain, and the weird mud creature starts pulling on his chain, trying to pull him back into the house. And there's also a scene in the house where Indy's right at the foot of the bed and something reaches out and grabs him from under the bed and pulls him under. Now, it ends up being Todd. But those two moments in particular were just harrowing because the dog was in danger. They weren't like the greatest scares ever, but because you're putting a dog in peril, I was like, oh my God, let the dog be okay. So your moment was literally the moment like it sent a shiver down my spine. But those two other moments where I was like, oh my God, the dog's in danger, it put me in a panic mode for a minute. So there are effective scares in this movie.
And what I loved about this particular scare in the basement stairs is that it doesn't require putting the dog in any sort of actual peril. It's actually a very humane situation because all they had to do was shoot a scene shooting upward at Indy, get all his reactions. Then all they have to do is just now point the camera at Todd and let Todd do all of his acting. That's all they had to do. Then Indy could go off and play, go run around in the yard, do whatever the hell he wants, and they could shoot all the rest of the stuff without him. They didn't even have to scare him in that scene. They didn't even have to do a little jump scare on Indy or anything. And I was like, man, that's crafty filmmaking. I love seeing stuff like that, and it was easily the most effective scare in the movie.
Yeah. Next category, Patrick. Can our pets survive this horror film? Now, as I mentioned, have two beloved dogs that are my entire universe. Sadly, I did meet your dog when I was in San Diego.
That's right.
Before your dog passed away. So I guess we're using your dog as the example here.
No, I have pets right now, Damon. But
oh,
well,
yes,
you'll go first since you do have the two dogs.
I'll say this. My one dog Hopper is the lovingest dog ever. My other dog Brody, if you throw him a toy, he'll play with that toy for 4 hours straight. He will not stop playing. He'll be exhausted, panting, needing water, and he'll still try to play. But Hopper is the lovingest dog ever. He will run up and lick your face for an hour straight if you let him. He's the lovingest. He is a lover, not a fighter. I think my dog Hopper would be a little bit more like Indy, where he'd want to stay with me to the very end. So I don't know. Maybe he's the bandit of it all, like that. Whereas Brody,
Right.
I adore my dog Brody. Brody is a barker. Like he'll bark at you, and he actually weirdly for they're both Boston Terriers. For I didn't mention that in the show. They're both small dogs. Um, Brody barks loudly. Like he sounds like a bigger dog than he actually is. He's like 29 pounds, but he sounds like a bigger dog. But my dog Brody is the biggest scaredy cat ever. Like I'll throw his toy, and we have like a hallway leading back to our bedroom. If it goes into the darkened hallway, he'll stand at the end of the hallway and just look at his toy. And I have to be like, Brody, go get your toy. And you'll hear him scatter like the Scooby steps, like run to get it, run back. It's scary. My dog is the scariest dog ever. So Hopper would stay with me like Indy. Brody would run the fuck away. So I guess Brody's the one who makes it because as soon as he saw something weird, he'd be like, he's the fuck out of there. He's like, fuck Damon, I'm out of here.
Oh my God. When I think about Shug was my dog who you met. Shug was a dummy. Shug was we said he was not for thinking, he was for loving. Like that's what he was, just a big dumb dodo of a dog. If he had been in this situation, I don't think I think he would survive because he'd have no fucking clue that I died 7 days earlier. He'd be like, I don't know. I'm just down here eating all the food that you guys left around. But I do have two pets right now, Damon. They're two snakes. I have a king snake and a Mexican king snake. Tez is my Mexican king snake. I love him very much. He's all black. He's gorgeous. I love him so much. Those things do not give a shit about you. 100%. They do not care. If somehow they got loose and they were living during this particular time where I'm expiring, they would just go for the warmest spot in the house, which is what they do when they escape. And then, then when the time comes, and the door opens, they'd skitter out and they'd go off and they'd live their lives as snakes do. They would not give a shit that death was coming for them at all, or for me at all.
Yeah, that like yeah, I get that. They're just like, oh, Patrick, who gives a fuck about Patrick? I'm gonna
I don't
go
give
get
a
that.
fuck about that guy unless he's got like a dead mouse for me. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I think that's a little different. That's why we say dogs have a different relationship because dogs are like inherently
Yeah.
loyal. So
But truth is, either way, none of my pets, even the late great Shug, would not have given a shit.
yeah, I only have one, and that's only because he's a scaredy cat, and he would just run the fuck away and be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
David's dead, whatever. I'm gonna go run the other direction." Because fuck that. That would literally be his reaction. So yeah. Patrick, next category: remake, sequel, or leave it alone. Pretty self-explanatory category, but just for people maybe new here, this is the category where we take whatever movie we're reviewing and we say, should they sequelize it, should they remake it, or should they just leave it alone? So when it comes to Good Boy, remake, sequel, leave it alone.
Damon, I'm going to say leave it alone. You said very early on in this podcast it was a one and done experience for you. I happen to feel the same way. I don't know why I would revisit this movie. And if it was on, I don't know that I would immediately turn it off, but like it's going to be on streaming, so I'd have to put it on. And the odds that I'm going to put it on are very low. The odds that my wife is going to want to watch it is pretty high, so I'm assuming when it comes to Shudder, she'll watch it. I don't know that I'm going to be glued to watching it. It's it's what it is, and I definitely don't want a sequel. I don't need to see Indy go through this on a bigger scale. Now there's a zombie outbreak or some shit. I don't need to see anything like that. Let Indy be. He did a great job. He made a great movie. He's done his part, and let him just enjoy the rest of his life.
Yeah, leave it alone is the answer. I mean, the only other question I would have, I guess, is like if you're going to say remake it, would be you could remake it or edit it to where it'd be a shorter film. And I'm not trying to dog on this film, no pun intended. I'm not trying to rag on the film. I'm just saying, like, in my perfect film, this would have been a 40-minute film or a 45-minute film. It didn't need to be 72
Yes.
minutes. That's an editing thing. That's not a remake thing. But no, I leave it alone because you don't need a sequel. And as I said, kind of jokingly, but also kind of serious at the top of the podcast, which was these point of view stories. I appreciate, like you mentioned, Jed Shepard doing host, a Zoom call. That's pretty goddamn creative. That's a really creative idea to get into like a found footage movie that's not just a traditional found footage movie. Same thing with like In a Violent Nature being the point of view of the killer. At some point, we got to reach a breaking point. Like, I don't need the cat version of this. Like, I don't need that. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I don't need the version where it's your snake and the snake just slides out of the house because he's like, I don't give a fuck about Patrick. I don't need that version. I don't need that story. So leave it alone. Cool, creative idea, Ben Lindbergh. You did the damn thing. one and done. I don't need another one.
I agree.
Last category, Patrick, and I'm being genuine when I say this, is it scary? So when it comes to Good Boy, is it scary?
It has scary elements. It's a haunted house movie, and it plays itself as such. As Damon mentioned earlier, pucker factor of 20. It can be harrowing at times. It's not the kind of movie that would scare me. It's just not. And we've said this. We used to say this all the time on the podcast. It takes a lot to actually scare me and Damon. That's not really a thing. But does it have dread? Yes, it does. It has a great sense of dread. And I think it's going to scare a lot of people. And I think for people that have just a general anxiety about dogs being harmed, they are going to be fucking tearing their hair out for the entire movie, really hoping that nothing happens to Indy.
That's it for me. Like, there are a couple like traditionally like good scary moments, like kind of good. But as I said, ultimately this is still a haunted house movie, and my criticisms of haunted house movies always stay the same. They don't really scare me, and this one is no different. But because they put the dog, I was on the edge of my seat at certain points because I was terrified for the dog. As I said, if this had just been Todd, no offense, Todd, I can give a fuck about you. You could be in those same situations and it wouldn't
Bye,
have done
Todd.
for me. Sorry, Todd. But the dog, Indy being this adorable dog, and dogs are just like the innocent, sweetest, most beloved creatures on earth, at least for me personally, that raised the tension, that raised the dread. So it works because of the dog. If this was anything else, I'm sorry. People are like, that's really cruel to say. You're fucked up. If that had been a child, I don't think I would have felt that way because I don't have children and I don't want children. So I have a different relationship, but I love my dogs. So yeah, it worked in that regard because it's a dog. And, I think most people who have dogs or ever owned a dog are probably going to feel the same way.
Yeah, I think so. Even if they haven't owned a dog and they just love dogs, it would freak them out.
Yeah, 100%. All right, Patrick, that is our episode for Good Boy. We will be back. We're going to we are now officially into October. We got a lot of films coming this month. We got the new Brian Bertino movie opening, sadly on Paramount Plus. I'm not dogging Paramount Plus, but I'm saying like
I am. I'm pissed. I should be seeing Vicious in theaters.
I'm not naming names. I saw somebody on Horror Talk, one of our friends, say that like Vicious is dropping and they're putting it straight on streaming. So that might say like why the film may not be very good because they're putting it straight to streaming. The Dark and the Wicked went straight to streaming, and that is one of the scariest fucking movies of the past decade.
It's
okay?
Phenomenal movie, and that went straight to streaming.
So don't judge going straight to streaming as like the good or bad of this film. But that's coming next week. We're going to be reviewing that. We got Frankenstein, Black Phone 2, Shelby Oaks. We got a ton of horror movies coming in October. It is the month of spooky, so stay tuned for all of that. And Good Boy, of course, is available in theaters right now. It will eventually end up on streaming on Shudder. Hello, Shudder.
Hi, Shudder.
But this is a theater movie, just like In a Violent Nature. Go see it in the theater. It is worth your time to see this in the theater. As always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in the show. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. As I mentioned earlier, patreon.com/rewind to living dead. You're going to get this episode in a matter of moments, whereas everyone else can wait a few more days. So make sure you check us out over there. And also on our YouTube channel, just search Rewind to the Living Dead and find us over on YouTube. Like and subscribe. We're slowly but surely building up our subscriber base over there. So like and subscribe our show on YouTube as well. You got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, your experience with Good Boy. We always like hearing from you guys. Hit us up on email, rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. Or find us on social media. Just once again, search Rewind of the Living Dead on Facebook, Twitter/X, or Instagram. And hit us up with messages. We love to hear from you guys over there. Or you can always find us on our personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes in the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you then.
Roof.